C'est Tom et moi, Julie. Nous sommes les intrépides, ouais! Et non, c'est David Beaucage de Drette et je ne peux absolument rien pour vous. Appelez-moi pas, là. Les affaires, j'ai un beau-père, je pense qu'il y a un racket dans le coin. Non, je peux rien pour vous. Bon. Mais par exemple, j'espère que vous allez bien, là, malgré un confinement qui se veut pesant. N'oubliez pas de prendre vos vitamines B12, D, oméga 3 et un épisode de Drette sur le tape. Ce cocktail peut aider là, à combattre une certaine dépression saisonnière qui s'acharne sur nous. Un rare épisode spécial aujourd'hui, rare épisode en anglais. J'en ai fait quelques-uns à travers les années. Il y a eu Mike Condon dans la première saison. Il y a eu Brian Burke plus tôt cette année qui est disponible, je le rappelle, sur Patreon. Si vous en voulez plus, les prochains épisodes sont déjà sur Patreon et je vous avertis, ils sont juteux. Ça dégouline, donc je ne perdrai pas de temps si j'étais vous. Patreon.com/Drette. Mais ouais, un rare épisode en anglais et c'en est un spécial cette semaine. Je sais pas si j'en ai déjà parlé au podcast. J'ai vraiment des problèmes de mémoire, mais dans le cadre du Pro-Shop culturel, il y a un livre que j'ai adoré lire pendant le premier confinement. On est rendu au je sais pas combienième, mais et c'était un livre qui s'appelle Odd Man Rush. Je suis toujours évidemment à l'affût des œuvres artistiques de tout genre reliées à notre obsession nationale qui est le hockey. Puis je me souviens plus comment j'étais tombé sur ce livre-là, Odd Man Rush, qui est écrit par un gars qui s'appelle Bill Keenan, qui est un gars qui a gradué de Harvard et qui après ça a été joué dans des ligues mineures en Europe, et il raconte son espèce de parcours, lui qui est né sur l'île de Manhattan, là, qui est quand même pas un endroit où, tu sais, c'est la plus grosse, une des plus grosses villes au monde, tu sais, c'est pas, il y a presque pas d'aréna, tu sais, c'est comme un peu un contexte improbable pour jouer au hockey puis encore moins devenir bon. Mais là, il y avait la chance d'avoir des parents assez aisés puis qui ont dit, regarde, si t'aimes le hockey, on va s'arranger. Puis tout son parcours jusqu'à des ligues en Belgique, en Suède. Et c'est lui-même qui a écrit le livre, sans être un auteur, mais qui a quand même comme refait plusieurs drafts, plusieurs versions. Puis ce que j'ai vraiment aimé de ce livre-là, c'est que il y a quelque chose de très authentique dans l'espèce de parcours du gars qui s'accroche au hockey en sachant, tu sais, je jouerai pas dans la Ligue nationale, mais il y a comme ce rêve-là qui meurt jamais. Et un peu quand tu arrives à la croisée des chemins de, regarde, je jouerai jamais dans la Ligue nationale, je suis dans une 3e division suédoise, mais tu sais, les gens s'accrochent au hockey, puis lui, il est comme un peu lucide par rapport à ça, puis dans, tu sais, l'espèce de le rôle du hockey dans son identité, puis comment à un moment donné, faut que tu décroches, puis tu passes à autre chose, puis comment un peu l'écriture du livre a été cette affaire-là pour lui, finalement, dans son processus de transition, mais ça représente bien un peu le rêve de TQ poussé à son extrême, puis à travers son parcours, puis il est allé à Harvard, puis il a eu la chance de vivre des affaires quand même assez cool au travers de toutes ces expériences. Bref, Odd Man Rush. Et ce qui est arrivé, c'est que c'est peut-être pour ça que j'en avais entendu parler, c'est que le livre a été adapté en film. Et je pense que j'avais suivi la page Instagram, puis là, la page Instagram m'avait c'est ça qu'ils font maintenant, ils follow back, puis là, ils voient un certain nombre de followers, puis ils m'avaient dit, OK, veux-tu faire tu sais, on t'enverrait un chandail pour du film. Puis là, je suis comme, OK, mais moi, j'ai pas vu le film, tu sais. Puis j'ai dit, OK, mais moi, en fait, c'est drôle que vous m'écrivez. J'étais intéressé à rencontrer l'auteur. Fait que là, ils m'ont mis en contact avec Bill, que je voulais contacter de toute manière. Puis on a fait ça par Zoom. C'est un des premiers qu'on a fait là avec Benjamin Brault. Je vais vous avouer, ce qui m'intéressait vraiment, c'est vraiment le livre. C'est vraiment ça que j'ai trouvé cool, qui est authentique, les détails, qui est vraiment de la main de Bill. Le film, j'ai fini par le regarder, je pense, je me souviens même plus si c'était avant ou après l'entrevue, mais c'est pas, personnellement, j'ai pas trouvé que c'était un très bon film. Ça se voulait une adaptation du livre, mais adapter un livre en film, c'est comme un exercice de transvasage très, très, très complexe et difficile à faire. Donc, je leur en tiens pas rigueur, mais sachez d'entrée de jeu que ce qui m'intéresse, c'est pas le film, c'est vraiment le livre, que j'ai d'ailleurs prêté à Chucky Pellerino, faut pas que j'oublie. Ça, tu sais, des fois, tu prêtes des affaires, c'est ça. Alors, non, c'est pas vrai, on rien à chier. Alors, donc c'est ça, voilà, donc ça c'est Bill Keenan. Je sais pas si c'est ça, je l'ai rencontré là pour la date, c'était le 21 octobre 2020. Donc à l'automne. Est-ce que j'ai oublié des trucs? Non, c'est pas mal ça. Donc, un gars très sympathique. Je vais mettre une photo des trucs, mais sa voix, il y a comme un clash entre sa voix. Quand je réécoutais l'épisode audio, je comment il a l'air vraiment d'un dude, genre, mais non, c'est un gars qui a une face, puis il a vraiment un body language, très, très... il a l'air très doux. C'est un gars très doux. Puis ça a l'air weird, mais je tenais à le spécifier quand même. Parce que des fois, je trouve qu'il y a des fois, il y a des impressions qui passent différemment quand on n'a pas le visuel. Ce que j'aime pour certaines affaires. Mais lui, je me dis, en tout cas, je veux que les gens cachent que ce gars-là, c'est comme... Il a l'air extrêmement fin. Mais en fait, il est fin. Il est passé 2 heures avec nous. Mais il y a quelque chose de très inoffensif et très bon enfant dans le visage. Donc, c'est pas mal ça. Spedding. Je sais pas qu'est-ce que... Ah oui, c'est ça. Ben oui, c'est ça. Donc, je vais vous envoyer l'épisode. Je m'excuse d'avance pour un anglais évidemment extrêmement rouillé, surtout sur l'étendue de 2 heures, mais il a été extrêmement généreux. Il n'en a pas fait de cas. Et le voici. Je vous invite à aller lire son livre Odd Man Rush, que j'ai franchement adoré. Voici l'auteur, ancien joueur de hockey pro et gradué de Harvard, Bill Keenan.
Drette sur le tape. Avec David Beaucage.
Bill, thanks for coming on today. Seriously. Great timing because I was just done reading your book, like literally like a week ago. And turned out like I think the movie page on Instagram thought I was an influencer and wrote to me.
Oh, we're sending you a jersey.
Yeah. It was like,
yeah.
But you guys just wrote to me, I think, because I was following the page, or I don't know how like it works. And I was like, yeah, thanks for the jersey, but what about the writer? And I was like, I have a podcast. I'm sure they didn't know that because they just saw that my Instagram page, and I reached out and you
yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for being on anyway. But
thank you for having me.
So now you're in New York.
I'm in New York. Yep.
New York City.
Yep.
Manhattan.
Back where it all started. Yep.
So where you were born and raised?
Yeah, I'm right across the park from where I was born and raised.
Would that park happen to be called Central Park?
It's the Central Park, exactly. Our big one we got here. Have you been here?
Well, I guess let's start from the beginning then, which is how does a kid raised on the island of Manhattan, one of the biggest city in the world, ever get to be into hockey and get actually play hockey too?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I have a good answer, but it actually started right in this park in Central Park where there's a rink. It's hard to call it a rink. It's a swimming pool. And basically they freeze it for like 2 months. It's not even the winter. They freeze it kind of right before and after Christmas.
Right.
And, I mean, it's like that's where it started. I don't know. I can't, it was the Rangers won the Stanley Cup when I was like 8. And it's hard not to get into your local sports team if they're good, especially if they win it. So when they won it that year, and I have to say, who scored the most memorable goal was Stéphane Matteau.
Yeah, father of Stéphane Matteau Jr.
Exactly.
Yeah, Matteau. Do you still remember that call?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
What's your best memory from the '94 championship?
My best memory.
You remember any of it?
Yeah. No, I remember.
You were quite young.
Yeah, no, the best memory was coming out of Madison Square Garden after the games, and I'd be with my dad, and there'd be these women that were like handing out like the stripper cards.
Right.
So I would get these little collecting.
Because I
remember being like 8 years old and being, this is so cool.
I love that your father was not like, no, don't grab him. He was just with you.
Yeah, we'll just walk around the block 3 or 4 times. That's the old New York. That's like 1990s New York. That doesn't exist anymore. So you did go to the games and the playoffs? Yeah, I went to a couple of playoff games. Yeah, I was lucky enough that year. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I you know what? I went to one at Madison Square Garden, and then I went to, because Matteau's goal was against the Devils. Yeah. So we went to one in New Jersey. Because that was where they met in the conference finals. So
So you drove to New Jersey?
Yeah, I mean that's not that far.
No,
it's not. Yeah, it's like.
Or you can take the train and.
Yeah, it's pretty close. So that's where it started. Yeah, I mean it was just kind of like watching the Rangers on TV and then playing a little bit here in Central Park.
Like none of your parents actually played or none of that?
No. They had no idea what they were getting into.
And your idol played for the Rangers at the time. Tell me about your idol who ended up be writing the foreword of your book. So tell me about the guy go ahead.
Have you heard of him before?
Adam Graves?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. He's like a big.
I look younger than I actually am. But, yeah.
No. But okay, yeah, no. Adam Graves was a player on that team. I think he might have. He was kind of. He was sort of like embodied everything that was to me so appealing about hockey. From he was a tough goal scorer. He had good hockey hair. He was pretty much like the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I went to, Canadian. He was pretty much just like when I thought of what's a hockey player, he was pretty much it. So, yeah, I mean, it was, I think after that year, my mom found, he ran a summer hockey tournament back home. And so she drove me up. She somehow found his number and called up his home, and his wife answered.
What?
Yeah. And she's like, my son's really into this. And I read in the paper, there was a thing in the New York Times that was about Adam Graves because he had helped everyone in the community. Like he was really big. He comes from a family that's like really, they were like just salt of the earth people. They're really good. And so he was always trying to give back. And he ran this camp up in Windsor, Ontario. And she saw it and she tracked it down, and we drove up there that summer for like a week.
It was really not that hard to find his number. That's what I take away from the story. Like,
no, I don't know how
his home number.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect it was not that easy, but she's very good. She's good. My mom, she can
very determined.
Resourceful. Yeah, she was not going to be stopped. I don't know if his home number, but she got to his wife somehow, and they were
that's funny.
What is wrong with you,
lady?
You want to come? Yeah.
So your mom drove you up to Canada.
Yeah.
For the summer, and I think you even got to meet him, didn't you?
Yeah. No, it was like a week. It was a week, one of those like week-long camps in the summer, and got to meet him. And I think she was expecting him probably not to show up. He's an NHL player, but he was there every day, and I can't imagine it was that much fun for him. Like you're there and it's like a bunch of like 8-year-old, 9-year-old kids. No,
but it makes up for a lifetime of memories for you guys.
Absolutely. Exactly. I mean, it's as cool a thing as I remember growing up, being able to see like the person that you idolize giving you the time of day.
And then flash forward like 20 some years and you write your first book and you're like, how did the idea of was he like the first choice of you had in mind?
It's funny. It was a friend I had who was like, when I was trying to get the book published, there was a family friend who worked at MSG, which is like the network that broadcasts the Rangers and Devils games. And her name is Deb Placey. And I actually just originally asked her to write a blurb, like kind of like an endorsement. And she was well aware. She read the book and knew that I was, a big fan of Adam Graves. And she said, well, I know, why don't we ask, would you be interested? And I was like, of course I'd be interested if you could track him down. And he said yes. And I was able to meet him again 20 years later. And yeah, I mean, it's exactly like he's most of the time, you hear about someone and you meet them, your idol, and it's just like a huge letdown. And this guy only went up in my book. He was like,
how was it?
It was as memorable as we've just met somewhere in Midtown, and he seems like he's the guy that like I wish I had been in a locker room with him because there's like kind of different parts of people, and I know he has a very specific image here and he holds to it, and I feel like there's probably another side that I would have loved.
Lighter.
Yeah. But he still is just a good guy. I mean, he didn't have to do any of this. Like, it doesn't help him at all.
So he still lives in New York?
I think he still works with the Rangers.
Oh.
I'm not entirely certain these days, but I think he's still involved in like the development of like the the prospects. It's a good person to have around.
Did you guys meet like at a Starbucks or something?
Something like that. Yeah. She set it up. It was something like that. It was like a coffee shop just somewhere, and he just walked in. I'm thinking, wow.
Did he remember you were like, Keenan, you smell just the same. And you're like, what?
He was nice enough to pretend like he
remembered.
He remembered. I suspect he's met a lot of fans.
Did he actually read the book?
I mean, I
stuff
don't know.
to say.
Yeah. It's possible. Here's the thing. It wasn't done. Like he wrote it before, right? So like, I hope I sent him a book. And I hope he does. But but it was like I think at that point it was only like half done. So it was more because the whole publishing process. You have to. It's a long slog.
Yeah, we'll get to it later. Yeah. But I was just like wondering, a guy like that, when an NHLer gets asked to write like a forward and stuff, and do they write it like themselves, or do you know what I mean? Like we have like a ghostwriter, like this website like Players Tribune.
Yeah,
all the guys, but it's never them. Like you can feel it's always the same guy writing all the articles. It's the same style.
Or woman.
Or a woman, depending on who is the person.
Yeah,
but, you can see it's the same style, every time.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think he wrote that. I mean, this is short. Like this is like 2 pages. I think a lot of those are probably like the books themselves. If they're like about an NHL player, most of them have like a co-writer.
Right.
That gets credited for, it'll be like so-and-so with so-and-so.
Right.
And I think they basically, the way that works is you kind of have a conversation with a writer who then sort of translates those stories.
Yeah, that's what
I'm not certain how that works.
Right. So anyway, what's his nickname? Gravy, was it?
Gravy.
I
think so.
And I think so. You do know. Don't act like if you don't. No. And so this guy was like everything you wanted about Canada, and you had some obsession as a kid about Canada. You wanted to be Canadian. Yeah. And tell me about this, because as a Canadian, it really sounds funny, because usually it's the American making jokes about Canadian being a sub, and now you were a kid being like, all I wanted was being Canadian. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was what hockey was like. Hockey was in Canada, so I didn't grow up with anybody that, forget like knowing or being interested in hockey. Like it wasn't even on a radar. Like it wasn't even, it's just like not part of like every day. It has since changed, and there's a lot more hockey now, but you kind of, it's all like you have to find people that relate to you and sort of like are on your wavelength, and they were not my classmates.
Right.
So it kind of became pretty clear to me that, when you're a kid, you sort of like assume the identity of what you want to be. And when I looked at the Rangers, you go down the Rangers roster and it's like Canadian, Russian, Canadian.
Kovalev.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking of. So it's not, it was like, well, it seems like if I want to be on the Rangers, it looks like they're all Canadian. So it was kind of that sort of simplistic mindset.
You had a huge Canadian flag in your room.
I had Canadian flags everywhere. I had them on my like jacket. I had my mom. So
what did your parents say about it? Like this Canadian?
I have no idea. They just humored me. I think they were like, he'll grow out of it.
Did you ever? But you also you were going to say something. No, you were going to say no.
No, the nice thing is having spent some time up there. It's beautiful, and
Where did you go?
I mean, eventually, once you start playing tournaments, it was a lot of time spent in Toronto and Montreal. And
so you've been to Montreal?
Yep. In fact, the tournament we used to always go to was in a place called Repentigny.
Yeah, it's like in the north suburb of Montreal.
Yeah, it was fun because it was like you go there and there's rinks all over the place. like the Canadians, they don't see it that way. It's not that cool for them because they don't know what it's like to grow up where I grew up, which is there's no rinks anywhere.
Yeah.
You know?
But and people fantasize about New York City for so many other reasons. Like, you grew up in the city, man.
Which is awesome. It's got the best of the best, pretty much anything you could want other than hockey.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like, there's nothing about this place is, I love it. It just so happens that the one thing they don't have was hockey.
Do you have any memories from playing in Repentigny from as a kid?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I remember playing a team called the Montreal Viper Outlaws, and they just beat the shit out of pretty much anybody that came in their way. And I
had a friend who played for them who ended up going like NCAA Division I. So
this team had NHL players like left, right, and center. I mean,
really?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Yeah, I can tell you there was two brothers, Latendresse, and one of them, at least one of them played in the NHL. They had a guy named Adam Pino, who was actually American, who played a little bit in the NHL. They had a kid, Adam Blanchette, who played over in Europe. I'm sure there are others, but they were just like, you're 13 and then they look like they're like 25.
Right.
And there's always a team like that. And they won.
That's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny you played the Latendresse brothers. I actually know like Guillaume. So he's the one who played for the Canadians. Yeah.
You asked them about that. I mean, I remember them well because it was like a terror when we'd have to play them. It was like 10-0 every game.
Yeah. Guillaume ended up playing the NHL for Montreal, Minnesota, Ottawa. He had to quit because of concussions. He played in Switzerland, but he had like his career, but he was a goal scorer. He played with like Martin Avlat in Minnesota, and he had like his best season there. And his brother, Olivier, he came on the podcast before we were a podcast. When we were doing pilots, he came on, and I was so bad and it was way too hot in the room, and he was like sweating. So I never ended up putting out the episode. And he got back to me once. He was like, "Was I that bad that you never put out?" And I was like, "No, actually I was." So yeah, both of them came on. Guillaume came on later. I think it was like a live show before an audience anyway. And Latendresse, he recently started his own podcast with Maxime Lapierre from, he played in Montreal, Vancouver.
He played in Sweden too.
Yeah, he played for Modo. Yeah. He came with
very short.
Yeah. Because were you there when he got there?
No. But I remember reading about it because I just sort of like had friends that were up, and they'd always be like, "Oh, here's the new. We got a new guy from the NHL." And I know some of those don't end so well for those guys. If they come from the NHL, I think it's harder.
Yeah.
I don't know how that. I just know.
Yeah, actually, he came on the podcast recently, and I was like, "Hey, what?" Because I went to Modo, I was like, "How did that go?" And he's like, "Not very well because the team was not very competitive, and I was just coming out of the NHL, trying to make my way up the best leagues in Europe, but I was not really there to have like just chill and have fun. I was there to perform, and after a while, I think it was just like his ticket on to Switzerland, where he did do good, and like kind of stayed there for like 4, 5, 6 years. Now he's in Germany and he loves it. And but yeah, in Modo, he's like the team was just not doing very well, and so it was hard for him to kind of perform. But anyway,
that happens. Yeah.
We kind of digressed here, but we're talking about your tournament in Repentigny, and then we got lost. But what did I want to ask you? Oh yeah. Because I was curious about asking about Montreal, because every time I run into some American, the usual story is they go, "Where are you from?" And I say Montreal, and they always have a story about either strippers,
St. Catharines,
or like booze or like bachelor parties. I'm like, yeah, of course.
I remember. I remember staying in something Westwood or something Weston, something with a W outside of West
Island, Westmount.
Westmount.
Yeah,
it was a girl that I went to college with, and she was like we went up there and stayed at her parents' place. This was just a Montreal story. This has nothing to do with hockey. She and
I can see in your eyes that she's the one that got away.
No. She didn't get away. She was very much. She was a hockey player. She was a hockey player, and so she was cool. No, I remember going out there in Montreal, and we saw like Brendan Fraser. You know, is it Brendan Fraser?
Yeah, the actor.
Yeah, I mean,
he used to be famous.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of like there was something very depressing about it because like he was like out there in the club, and there's like the girls were so young. It was so weird. Like it was like this. You don't go out like that and see what you see like that. What I saw in Montreal was totally different than what you'd see in New York.
I don't know, club was
but
that?
It felt like you were in like Europe.
So you were in a club and Brendan Fraser
was like in the back and he had, you know, it was a suspect sort of scene. I don't know.
Sounds like the most depressing evening I've ever.
It was fun. It was like a cool, I really liked
the guy from is that the guy from The Mummy?
Yeah.
That's him.
Yeah.
Jesus. And underage girls.
Selling wine on the street. Like it was a lot of.
So that was a girl from Harvard?
Yep.
That would make sense because if she's from Westmount is the wealthiest area in all of Quebec, basically. So that would make sense.
It was a beautiful time. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much. I don't think she knew what she was getting into inviting us up there. It was like me and some of my roommates, and we were all friends. But and we basically had like a free weekend in the spring, and she said, "Why not? Montreal sounds fun."
It's not very far away from my place right now. Actually, it's like a 5-minute drive from where I'm.
Really?
But I'm in a much more.
Yeah, I mean, this was her parents' place. Like, this was. I was like, I remember. Yeah, I mean, it was an incredible place, and like this is. I was thinking this. We can't. Let's do as little damage as possible. And
right. I love the Brendan Fraser.
Just it's like a very over the hill version. That's what I was thinking. The Mummy, yeah, that's kind of.
Speaking of Canada, you even mentioned in the book you picked up some Canadian accent. Is that true?
I think so. Yeah.
So how I don't know
what
words? What's the?
I think it's just how you talk. I think it's. I don't know if I wouldn't say it's necessarily French Canadian.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious about it because like to me it's just like another language, so it's not mine. So I'm
yeah, but there's curious. Like there's
A.
Yeah, the A. But it's also like maybe it's not as much Canadian as it is just like there's a way that you talk in a hockey locker room.
What is it?
I don't know.
Can you give me some examples, like some words?
I think saying when you start every sentence, I do that.
Or like for sure.
Yeah.
Saying for sure.
Yeah. It's like these awful habits that I still have, but they're okay.
Oh yeah, it's good, Because like to me, it's like it's not my mother tongue, so to me, I have some outsider look on it too. So that's why I was curious. What was your perspective on it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably you can relate to it. It's more like not necessarily Canadian as much as it's like a specific, like maybe Toronto,
right?
A specific area in Canada.
That's very funny.
Yeah.
Growing up in New York, you mentioned your mom. You had anyway from the book. Anyway, it sounds like your parents were very nice, and about like letting you and actually helping you
do
your thing. And they obviously saw that you were really into hockey. And tell me about that amazing setup because you lived in an apartment in New York City, right?
Mm-hmm.
That amazing setup that you had in your apartment that kind of reminds me of the rich of hockey. Like that's what it sounds like anyway in the book. You had some crazy setup of a rink. Like explain.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. So my parents still live in this apartment, and basically when I was in 5th grade, my mom got pregnant with my younger sister, and we had a small apartment, and we basically got to the point where they realized before this baby's born, we need to move. So there was a place that was 2 blocks away, but had, an extra bedroom. But it was like, it was exactly what they wanted, but it was like going back into like the 70s, like everything, like it just looked, and everything was outdated. And it all needed to be like sort of renovated to be like livable. Cause this was a family that had, their kids had been there and they moved out and was just like, we moved there and we knew the renovation was going to take like a year because everything had to be redone. Like stuff just didn't work. And so part of the nice thing was that because it was all being renovated, there was one living room, you know, you have a living room, right? And
ish, sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. So I remember thinking, I was like, geez, this is good. Like it's a big rectangle. And I remember thinking if you could put a like a hockey net on one side, right where the fireplace opening is, you could actually just like set up pucks on the other side and shoot. And the thing is, I go back now and obviously it's all like, you know, it's got couches and stuff in there, but, it's not as big as I thought, you know, like when you're a kid, it seems huge.
Yeah.
And it is when you're 10 years old, it's like a big, so anyway, I remember saying like, can you just make sure that you renovate this last, you know? So they're like, all right, I guess. And I just I went online and I bought a hockey net and I just had it sent up. I helped like the doorman and then I just set it up and
so you had a garage in your living room.
Had the garage. That's what it was. It was all my friends that like when I was growing up, I played out in Long Island in New Jersey and they all live in the suburbs and they had exactly what you're talking about, like a garage. And one of the, you know, things rather than have a car was a net where they could shoot. So that was what I set up in the apartment.
In a living room in Manhattan.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great. Do you realize like how awesome from your parents it is to let you?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Allow you.
They weren't always pleased and it ended. There's a lot of like fights and broken windows, but it was better than like doing something stupid outside the house. You know, it's like rather do it inside.
What's the biggest fight that happened or biggest incident related to that?
I mean, there was a time when I started really getting like, it was big enough that I remember being able to like rollerblade around there. Like it's a small contained area, but when you can start picking up speed, you know, it's like when you're trying to like, you know, if you want the hardest shot, you kind of got to like skate into it. Right.
Right.
So eventually I could start, you know, as I got a little bit older, I mean, it was just like you know, slap shot off a post, broken window. And I remember getting like hearing the window break, and then it was like you hear it and then you see it like slowly, like when something shatters and it like slowly like it looks like a spider web and you're like, oh my God. And then all of a sudden just fucking falls down. Yeah. And then just being like, oh my God. And just like, and just like both my parents being home and I'm thinking like, who's going to come here first? And it was my dad. And I remember just him picking me up by the arm and just walking by the arm into his bedroom and like throwing me on the bed and you know, shouting. But
how old were you?
I mean, probably like 10 or 11.
God damn it, we give you everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then, but then
you just move on. They've got other, you know.
Yeah. Would they put like something like to protect the window from?
They didn't. That would have been smart. I think we just got a new pane. Actually, that one we just like, there was no reason. I think they said, let's just.
How could you have neighbors like the people living underneath must have hated you?
Yeah, they did. Yeah. They did. That woman's, there was a woman that lived below that specific unit. She was really old though, so she was like almost deaf, which helped because like she couldn't hear that much, but she would call from time to time.
Can you ask Billy to stop playing, please?
Yeah. It didn't work. But.
That's awesome. You played minor hockey, like you had to, like your parents had to like drive you out of Manhattan and go to some like Connecticut and all those places, and you even had the chance to play with some guys that ended up in the NHL, and some of them even won Stanley Cups. Tell me about a few of those guys. For instance, you play with a guy ended up winning 2 cups and a Conn Smythe trophy. Not too shabby. Tell me about him and all the other boys.
Yeah,
Who's that?
That was Jonathan Quick.
Yep.
On the LA Kings. I mean, he was pretty much. You never know. Like when you're a kid, you don't have a sense that like anyone can actually make it to the NHL, and it's still kind of crazy because that was like there were a couple guys on that team I played in. That was called the Connecticut Yankees. There was another guy named Matt Lashoff who played a little bit, not as long, but I mean, yeah, it was the thing that's crazy about that team is that Quick, when we started, wasn't even the starting goalie. Like he was the backup, but it's like hard. It's hard to, it's been incredible to see, to see someone.
What you're trying to say is you could have never guessed he would have
never guessed. Yeah, I mean, he's good, but it's kind of like at what point you start looking back. It's totally different with the goalie, but you kind of look back and think like, at what point was this the guy that was going to win? I mean, it's not making it to the NHL. It's like winning the Stanley Cup multiple times and being the MVP of the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's crazy.
And going to the Olympics twice. And being
it's
the
like
starter in 2014.
Those are like beyond what you dream. Like you dream of getting to the NHL, and then you're like he's doing stuff that's like far beyond just making it, which is it's awesome. I mean, he couldn't have been more deserving, and it's more than anything though. It was like it was fun. In fact, I still keep in touch with some of the guys. That have since, like a lot of the guys, it's like we were 12 when we played that year together. It was like right before high school, and a lot of guys like didn't. I'd say maybe a third of the guys probably didn't even play after that.
Really?
You just.
Did you keep in touch with Quick?
I kept in maybe through high school. He went to a high school called Avon, and there were a bunch of guys. There were probably like 4 guys from that team that went to Avon. So we kept in touch kind of through juniors and while they were in prep school. And then a lot of them went to college as well. And then you sort of lose touch.
Did you get to him when you won the cup and go like, hey man?
No. Yeah. Well, I sent him, I was still friends. We had one other good friend in common on that team who I kind of sent my congrats through him. You also
played with like Matt Gilroy.
Yep.
That's another guy.
Later on, yeah.
Did he play for the Rangers?
He did. Yep. He played, I think, maybe 2009.
Was he like undrafted?
Yep.
And like signed from college?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that might even be more unlikely than Quick. I mean, Quick was like, I think he left college early. Yeah, I mean that was like a NHL prospect when he was in college. And I mean Gilroy when we played on a team called New York Apple Corps together, and he was a couple years older, and he was going to go I think to like a Division III school at one point, and just kind of that was it, and go play. And then he stayed one more year, which is the last year you can play up till you're 21 in the U.S. juniors. And he went to another competing team in the same league. So he left Apple Corps and went to a team in Walpole, Mass. And he did well. And he got a walk-on offer at BU. And he had always been a forward. And they offered him a spot as a defenseman.
Right.
So that's crazy. That's crazy to think like you're going to get.
Yeah.
And then you fast forward 4 years and he wins the Hobie Baker, and then he's playing on the defense on the Rangers. That is like a crazy story.
Did you keep in touch with him and then try to go watch him play at MSG?
Yeah. In fact, we used to see each other at the. So we in Long Island there was a rink. There still is a rink called it's in Syosset. It's I forget what it's called, but I played on a team called the New York Bobcats, and it's where like the Islanders used to practice, and in the summer they'd have these skates, and we would skate over during college. Like we went to college at the same time, and he was at BU, which is right near. We were pretty close to each other. And yeah, I mean,
where is he right now? What is he doing right now?
I think he's quit. I think he's done. I know he's done. I think he went over. I think he played a little bit in Europe. I think after the NHL, because he was old coming in. You know, I think when he graduated college, he was probably like 25. So it was, you know, it's a little bit different.
Still played in New York and then in Tampa.
New York, Tampa. I mean, there's a few places. Yeah.
Still probably made a decent amount of money. So
I'm sure he made. Yeah. I mean, it was like an incredible story coming out of
college.
I mean, it's like going in to be, going to college on like a walk-on deal, and at the wrong position.
Yeah, like, that's crazy.
Switching positions is like nuts.
That's unheard of.
Like, it is unheard of.
Like, I've never heard of anything like that. And speaking of youth hockey, I know you had because we spoke of a tournament, like when you went to Canada or something, but I think there's a story in the book where you played, I can't remember where it was. I guess it was Canada. I can't remember. And you played against some team that had this kid that was actually like a few years younger on the other team, ended up having like, I don't know how many points. And I think your dad even came up to you after the game and went like, yeah, that kid, huh? And you actually thought he was older or something. Tell me about that story.
Yeah. And so I think this was probably also when I was like 13. And like, this is one of those where when you're 13 and you play, when you're growing up, you play just your birth year. And I was born in 86. And so you might, every now and then there might be like, there's always like rumors of teams where they'd like forge a kid's birth certificates. Like, so you have like an 85 playing with an 86 birth year, and sometimes like an 84. And that makes a huge difference when you're that young. Like the difference. And they were saying this kid was an 87 and he was playing with the 86s. And there was also, I think this might have been maybe not at that tournament, but at other tournaments, this kid had like played as an 87 with the 85 teams. So like he was like very well known because like that never happens. Like you always like, I mean, every now and then you'll have it, but like that's like a monumental thing to be that age and play a year above. And it was Crosby, and he was just like, you could tell that's one where it was like there was no denying that kid was way better than everybody. Like it didn't matter like what level you put him at. He was just like faster, better at hockey in every respect.
Smarter. Yeah. And he had like, I don't know how many points that game you played against him.
Probably 5 or 10. I mean, it's just like no stopping. Like I remember just like relentless. It looked like he was just like he was like just built differently. He knew how to do everything so much better. There was no like, when you're a little kid, you're like, you might fall down, you might like mess up passes. And like, I mean, he was like shooting it. Like it looked like he was more comfortable on the ice than he was off the ice. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're that like steady and
he still does actually.
Exactly. I mean, it's nothing, not much has changed.
No.
And it's like dominant.
That's awesome. After like, youth hockey, you got a chance to go play NCAA Division I, which is like for some like it's just kind of the dream, I guess, because
that was it for me. Yeah,
especially growing up in the U.S. In Canada, people kind of go to sometimes the U.S., but in Quebec, I think in Canada they're more aware of the U.S. Than the rest of Canada, but in Quebec, I feel people like with the language, they're more. They usually go to like some Quebec universities. I don't probably because of the language anyway. So I knew some friends that played in Clarkson or stuff like that or Colgate but again, when you're raised in the US, like going to college is the thing, and you got a chance to go to Harvard. But actually before deciding on going to Harvard, they try to convince the players by having them over and visiting the campus and stuff. And they try to tuck you in. And tell me about that time where you went and how do they try to like, I don't know what's the right word, but.
Well, then you just sort of go on like a recruiting visit. Yeah. I mean, and yeah, that was kind of it. Like you get to a point, I think in juniors where, like what's becomes realistic and what's sort of like out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like, that was the goal. It was like try to get to college. And that's pretty much once you get to like 16, I don't know what happens now. Like now there's like kids. I remember once I was in college, there were kids committing to colleges at like 14. I don't know. I don't know how that works, but typically it was like at 16, you could start talking to schools. So you're like a junior in high school, and you go up and you visit, you'd like stay the weekend with like a couple guys on the team and try not to embarrass yourself. I mean, it's a big change when you're like, you go from, I mean, I was like at an all boys high school in Manhattan, and then you go up. I think my first visit was to Colgate, actually. And like, you have, you're like, wow, this is like, there's like girls around and these guys are a lot older. You're like staying with guys that are in their 20s. So it's like, there's like all sorts of like tactics and things. You walk into like a locker room and there'd be, I remember one school that you like walk into the locker room and like it was like all empty. It was a summer. It was like the season was over. It was like the end of the year. So like other guys' equipment, it was all out, and it was just like the jerseys. There's one jersey hanging there, and it had my last name on it. And I was like, wow, this is the coolest thing. And you're talking to the coach, and I'm like, man, these guys are really. And then I went back to my junior team. Like you go back home, and that weekend, and they're like, oh, how was that visit? And I'm like, yeah, I think they're really into it. Like, and I was talking to the guy, sat right in the stall next to me, and I was like, he was like, yeah, I visited. He's like, did they do that thing where they put your name on the jersey?
They always do that. They do that to everyone.
Yeah. So they have like all those. You start, and the other crazy thing is like you'll have you like go talk to one coach who's at one school, and you get all excited, and then like the season ends, and then the coach is fired.
Yeah.
And you go somewhere else, and it's like, it's an interest. There's a lot of sort of like that coaching carousel. So
yeah,
it's hard to.
And let's face it, like the guys try to take you in by like taking you out and partying. Basically.
Yeah. I mean, there's some schools that do a better job. Like some are more fun than others.
Did you almost? Places, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm not. I don't think I had any. I wasn't recruited at any schools that like had real good party scenes, unfortunately. Were
there any other finalists between, like, was it between Harvard and some other schools?
The one other place that I really looked at and was actually Air Force Academy, and I really like their coaches. Yeah, they have a team.
Is that like the Army?
It's not the Army. So there's three branches. You have the Army, the Naval Academy, and then Air Force Academy. And the Air Force Academy is out in Colorado, and it's it's part of the armed forces. Like you have to serve after you graduate. But
was that the part that turned you off?
I remember. The thing is, like, it was just like it's a really great school, and they were like building their hockey program, and I loved the coaches, and I remember thinking like it had great academics, and it's kind of people that you want to also go somewhere if you're going to be there for 4 years where you can succeed on and off the ice, and I really they went above and beyond to sort of like on the recruiting front.
What turned you off? What's really the might die later part, I guess?
What's funny though is like that you have to really want to do it, and that became like a serious consideration. I
would imagine so.
But that might, yeah.
Did you have a full scholarship going to Harvard, or you?
Well, they don't do scholarships.
Oh yeah, the financial aid.
Yeah. And that honestly, so like, I mean, Air Force, like you have everything paid for. Everyone does, but you also have like the facilities that they have were so far above kind of anything else I saw. Like when you look at it as far as like where would you want to go every day, like that's the beauty of something that's taken that seriously. When you go to, whether it's like the Naval Academy or Army or Air Force,
right?
You're getting kind of like the best of the best.
So did you have a financial aid like in Harvard too, or you?
I mean, you basically get it on like a need basis.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't have.
So let's talk about Harvard, because like people see it in the movies. People see party with red cups and they watch The Social Network or whatever. But what is it really like when you go to Harvard? What is it? I'm listening.
I mean, I think it's really, it's going to be a different experience, I think, for every single person. So I think there's probably, if whatever you see in movies, if you're talking about like whatever the social sort of seeing.
Let's say, what was your experience?
I mean, I had a good. It was. I lived with my best friends. It was basically the hockey players in my year and the soccer players, and I mean, it was, you spend all day. You're in class with them, and you go to practice, come back, eat dinner, play video games. It was fun. And the beauty, like Boston, is there's so many colleges there in like just the city of Boston.
Yeah, the area, yeah.
So it's a good place for school, and I'd say like most of my friends from college are still in the area. So I'll go up every now and then. You know, one's still a coach there. He's a soccer coach at Harvard. So.
Is there like one thing about Harvard that you wish people knew? Like, you know, like what the biggest myth about Harvard or something?
You know, one thing that so you're asking about like what you see in, you know, the movies and all this. I think it was, and I experienced this. There was a sort of a divide between people that were there for athletics or played a sport, and that the people that didn't.
Interesting.
And I would say that I think there were athletes that were not given as much credit for their academic prowess as they should have been. And I think there was sort of like some resentment from non-athletes that it's kind of like, you guys don't deserve to be here.
Really?
Not everybody, but that was definitely something I know people had experienced. Like you're not, you know, worthy of this. And it was very much not the case in my experience. I think that the schools talks about like excellence.
Right.
Kind of, and so whether that's on the field or on a rink or in the classroom. And I do think actually some of the smartest people I know were athletes there.
But you could feel there was some.
There's definitely like there were like things that would happen where, you know, there was one like stupid incident where something in like a dorm, some sort of like I don't know, like it wasn't like a snowman, but there was something had been like somebody had, or some group at the school had constructed some sort of like snowman sort of something in like the courtyard for Christmas time.
Right.
And it had been destroyed. And it was like, I think it was destroyed over a weekend with like drunk people. College students get drunk and they do stupid shit. Yeah. And it was found out that there were like some athletes that had been a part of it. And then all of a sudden, like there was some big, you know, thing in the school newspaper about how these athletes are like all bad people that don't deserve. And it was just like taken kind of, just didn't add up. So there was, you could tell that event sort of.
Yeah. I get what you say. Right. What's your, let's say, like, what's your favorite Harvard story, or from the 4 years you were there? Like this, your go-to story. Like, yeah, those were the times. Whether it was, I don't know. You talk in the book, you're very self-deprecating about having a hard time with girls. So.
Yeah, I got a lot of those.
Tell the listeners, what nickname did the boys give you?
Yeah, well, that was negative game. That was something I got from the girl there.
Oh, that's the girl who gave you that.
Yeah, Yeah,
that's funny. That
it wasn't as in fairness. If you knew her, it didn't hurt as much.
There was some humor to it.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad. Like I wouldn't want to be named negative game by some of the other girls, but I mean, you know,
I'm putting you on this spot.
It's crazy is like how long ago. I'm thinking now it's like 10 years ago. It's or even more.
Even more.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we might have to circle back to that.
Do you feel like you've enjoyed, like when you get older, you're like, should have, enjoyed this or that more, or should have, had more fun, or be more serious in college? Do you have like any regret, or like, what would you have done differently, like in Harvard?
I think nothing.
Right. So you did.
No.
Have a good time.
Yeah, no, it was good. I had fun, and it's like I've talked with other friends about this, like what if we could do it again. But the thing is, it's like if you could do it again, knowing what you know now, the whole point is that you go in there not knowing anything. So I think like the most important thing was like finding, I met to this day my best friends, and that I realize is I don't think everybody I know had that same experience where they're still in touch. And I talked to all of them, like, and they're
one of the guys you played with, probably maybe not one of your best friends, but Alex Killorn, fellow Montrealer.
Yeah, there was a lot of Canadians. There were a lot of Montreal.
Yeah.
Brothers.
Which one?
There's in fact, there's another one, and I met the younger one who didn't go. There were 3 that went to Harvard: Alex, Mikey, and Danny Biega, who was there after me.
You play with Alex Biega.
Yeah.
Who's in the NHL also.
Yeah.
So tell me about Killorn, because they call him Killer in the NHL. Now Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah, unbelievable.
What's your memory of Alex Killorn?
I mean, he was one where it's like he came in, he was a freshman when I was a senior. And I mean, you're never going to, again, like, be like, well, this year we got a Stanley Cup player. But when you get on the ice and you can kind of tell someone that's like just clearly, when you step on the ice and you're a freshman, I remember being like, this is so much better than what I experienced when I was playing junior hockey. That kid came in, and it was like he just sort of like, it didn't seem like it was a big transition for him to catch up. And halfway through the season, he was pretty, maybe not dominant his freshman year, but clearly this was not going to be a big like issue for him to be good in college. And
yeah, that's funny, because there's also like he's got a bit of a like on the back of your book where he mentions, and I was like, I wonder, like, did you actually, like, did Alex actually read the book, or you actually made him say those words in the back? Or I don't know, how did that go?
Well, I asked him, I was like, hey, I'm writing this. And so he did that before, I would say. This was, again, I think it might have even been before I wrote it. And I was like, look, I'm happy to send you what the final book is. But if you want to wait, he's like, no, I can do it now.
So was that his idea? For those, I'll read what's written on the back. It's called, it says, Alex Killorn says, last time I saw Billy, he stepped on a puck at a Harvard practice and almost took my head off with his stick when he fell. His writing won't hurt you, but it will make you laugh. So that's what written, and it's signed Alex Killorn. So I was like, is that a thing you had in mind? You wrote it down, and then you said, hey, Alex, would you mind signing that? Like,
well, that actually did. So I remember because I think we're talking about, okay, what would be something useful? Cause like, I don't have, the book written, and I remember this was like at the beginning of seasons, we have captain's practices. And what that is basically in college, you can't practice with coaches on the ice for like at least at like Ivy League schools, there's a period where you basically practice just with players. So it's like, I think the coaches can be in the stands. And so one of these first ones, there was we were doing a drill, and it's just sort of like, you're like, I think we line up at the blue line, and you kind of like circle to the far blue line, maybe like pivot, and you kind of pass back and forth with the guy in the front. And I remember there's a guy who was in my class who, like, he would always pass really weird. Like, he would always, like, every time he passed, there'd be like this crazy spin, because like he'd start the pass on the heel of his blade, and then he'd like spin it, and it would kind of like go towards the toe as he passed it. So it generated like a crazy amount of spin, rather than just like, passing it kind of like snapping it. Yeah. Right. And so every time he did that, when it spins like that, it would kind of go off your own stick. And if you were, if you weren't going to, receive it properly. So it would always piss me off. And of course, like, we're doing this drill and it spins off my stick. And so I have to go reach for the puck, like, because it, knocked off my, and as I did that, I stepped on a puck, and I remember I was about to fire the puck back at him, like, pass it back to him. And as I did it, completely whiff, and I stepped on a puck and like basically just fell right on my ass, and he was behind me. And so I was trying to think, I was like, maybe we could use this. And I forget how we did it, but I think I was like, Killer, remember, like, maybe we just say something, about the, something that happened on the ice, or something like that.
Did you get a chance to reach out to him after you won the cup?
Yeah, I emailed him. I talked to him right before I emailed with him right before they went into the bubble, and then, I mean, I remember watching them win, which was like, I mean, that's awesome. It's an unbelievable, yeah.
He's one of those guys that, you mentioned in the book that is, you mentioned a lot of names in the book. Those are all the actual names, that of the people you came across on your journey. Did at any point anyone in the book was like, hey, did you get any like negative feedback being like, hey, dude, like, I didn't like that or that part, or even legally, like, do you have to go through the people before using their real names?
I don't know. I didn't get any. No.
You just wrote it and it was like, yeah, that's it.
I just sent it to the publisher, and I assumed that I think they gave me a couple. There were a couple names that they said, you might want to change this.
What would the reasons be to change a name?
I think one guy was like a doctor, and I had said something about how he had prescribed something.
Right.
And I wasn't entirely certain what it was, but it was something. And so the way to solve this is just to like change the guy's name. Well, that's easy enough. Yeah. But it didn't really occur to me. I mean, I don't think it was anything there was nothing there that I don't think was, I mean,
yeah,
if they said it about me, I would probably be fine. It's, but I don't think anybody that...
On prend une mini-pause pour que je vous parle de notre collaborateur à l'épisode cette semaine, et j'ai nommé WebSim Hockey, la meilleure plateforme de hockey simulé, et en plus 100% québécois comme produit, absolument. Pourquoi c'est la meilleure? Ben, c'est très facile. Le niveau de réalisme, le niveau de détail, tout est sur la grosse coche. Il y a même des ligues rétro des années 70 à aujourd'hui. Tu veux jouer avec Timo Selané, Pavel Bourré, Stéphane Lebeau. Not a problem, buddy. Ça se passe sur WebSim. Non seulement ça, mais c'est ta dernière chance de venir t'inscrire à la ligue de WebSim Drette sur tape. Oui, on part une ligue avec les auditeurs, les autres férus aussi mongols que nous, pour savoir c'est qui le meilleur DG d'entre nous. Ah ben ça, faut venir sur drettesurtape.com/websim, t'inscrire, réserver ta franchise, et ça part le 11 février. Ouh, c'est pas plate. OK, de retour à l'épisode. So we talked about like the off ice at Harvard was a lot of fun, but unfortunately on the ice you got to play like I think 6 games in over 4 years. You had some brutal injuries that really kept you from playing, especially the 2 last years. What happened there, and how it kind of sent you off to Europe to kind of get a sense of closure through hockey, So,
yeah.
So what happened?
It was the right before Christmas of my sophomore year. I remember I was at practice and I go down to try to tie my skates and I thought I had like pulled my hamstring. And I went to the trainer. This is probably like, the beginning of December. And basically like, just, you're fine. It's just like a hamstring issue. And then I remember like that practice trying to like turn. I mean, it literally happened, on one specific day, something that was sort of like kind of bothering me to like, I couldn't skate. I couldn't move around. Like I couldn't twist. I couldn't pivot. I was like, I could skate forward, but anytime I tried to turn, it wasn't even being touched. Like I just couldn't really, I got this crazy pain in my leg and it got to the point where like the next week nothing had changed. And so I got an MRI and it wasn't a hamstring issue. It was, I had these bulging discs in my back that were creating nerve pain. And it was the problem with something like that is there's not like, if you break a bone, you just put a cast on it and it heals. And with the nerve, it basically was, you try to be as little invasive, sort of therapy as possible. You want to try to do physical therapy, anything to avoid surgery. And so we did, it turned out like this is the worst sort of type of bulging disc that nothing was going to help until I got surgery. Had one surgery at the end of my sophomore year, and that didn't even fix it. And then I had another one my junior year on my back that took out more. And that was my junior year, that second back surgery. And then I came back my senior year and I was like pretty much ready to go. And then I had 2 ankle surgeries.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Just won't leave you. And so you finished college with, still like a Harvard degree. I mean, this could be worse. Yeah. And then how do you go through like, all right, I'm not exactly ready to go and work right now. How did the hockey, and especially like with the health concerns, like how did you decide, I got to go to Europe, and like you could sense there was something that was left undone there?
Yeah. I mean, I just wanted to play a full season, really. I just wanted to be able to play, I skated, and I think
maybe would you have been like bitter about hockey had you not like?
Yeah, definitely. But also just like the thing I think at that age is like, that's pretty much, I think it was like 19 when I had the first surgery. And that's like kind of right when you're supposed to be at your very best. Like I wanted to play in college. And so that's like, you kind of work your way up and like you're taken down right when you feel like we're like, if the ultimate goal is to play in college and you get that sort of wiped out, it was more just being like, I want to be able to at least see how I could do.
Right.
So I, spent that summer after I graduated. It still was like, some of these injuries not fully healed, but knowing like, all right, let's give it some time, and basically had some friends that I knew that had been in Europe, played in Europe, still were in Europe, and kind of got in touch with them. It's like, how do you get over there? What's the best way to do this?
Yeah. And when we think of like, for people who haven't played there, we think of like pro hockey. We think very glamorous. We think like NHL, but that is not exactly the reality of minor European leagues. Like, tell me about that. Like, how is it really like playing in some, division in Belgium and all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I mean, that's why I wrote about it, because it's kind of, it was like, I mean, the first team, I remember the first practice we had, it was like half ice, like something I hadn't seen since like youth hockey, where like there's a junior team on the ice with you. So we get on the ice. I remember like getting ready in the locker room. This is like, I'd never been to Europe. So I didn't even know when I got off the plane. I remember like right when I got off the plane in Belgium, then occurred to me that I don't even know who's going to meet me at the airport. Like, because I was just so excited to like go play somewhere, and have an opportunity. So luckily I remember just kind of staying there being like, well, I got my hockey sticks, and I know that I emailed with someone. Maybe the guy that I emailed with will be there. And but yeah, I got on the ice and there was like these little kids out there. I didn't know,
So just to give the listeners an idea, like tell them like what you were once traded for in Sweden. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah.
What was it?
That was it was a Bosch washer dryer combo. Yeah.
To clean the jerseys and stuff.
Yeah. There was stuff like, and that never made it in the book, but and I don't think this is unique necessarily. I think this happens in the minors.
Oh yeah.
In the U.S., I'm sure, but there were guys like there, and this was also during like the financial, when it was like the financial crisis, 2008, 9, 10. So everything like the economy's getting hammered, and I remember there are times you'd be on a bus and you're going to a game and like all of a sudden coach gets a call, stop the bus, you turn around, and he's like, the team's folded. So like literally like teams would be in the league and fold mid-season. Jesus. Like on the way. We had one where we're like driving to a game and I don't know if this was because they didn't like the guy, this player, but we were on our way. This was in Germany, and we had a game that was near like Berlin, and it's a long drive from where we were. And I remember we had been there before, and when we're driving, I remember thinking like, this doesn't look right because this is not, something about it struck me as like, I feel like we're going in the wrong direction. And what they had done is they'd actually traded a kid that was on the bus to another team, and they were just going to drop him off. And this kid got dropped off with his hockey equipment because he thought he was going to go play the game with us.
Right.
But they were like, you're getting out here, in this town, and, here's, just take your shit with you. And like, he didn't even have his like, and I think they knew what they were doing, but it was like a ruthless thing to do to someone.
That's crazy. What's your favorite story that didn't make it onto the book? Like that you're like, it didn't fit, so I had to take it out. But
yeah, there was I spent a very brief time in, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it was, I played for like 2 weeks in northern Finland.
Really?
And it was the first team I went to at the beginning of the season. So it was the like very beginning of August, because in Europe they start much earlier.
Yeah. And
you go to northern Finland in August and it's like bright all the time. And it was not the place for me, that particular town. I remember like it was tiny, like the guy that I don't even really remember that much on the ice, and like the guys were fine. Like I didn't really meet too many, like I lived by myself for the short period of time, but like I remember going to the airport, you like fly somewhere, I think I flew to like Helsinki, and then there's another flight to this other town that's way north, and the guy that was like, he basically like did everything at the airport. Like he was like the bag guy, and then he drove me to like, he was the taxi driver guy. He like, this airport was like, it was
I feel like you're having a hard time expressing what was wrong about this whole thing.
Nothing was really wrong with it. It was just, some of those places, like you just feel like it's not the place for you. Like
what made you think that specifically? Like what made you go, oh, I got to get out of here?
I was not living with the guys on the team, and I could tell that it just didn't, I don't know, like
didn't feel welcome.
Yeah. And I don't know, it was such a short period of time, so maybe it wasn't like, didn't give it much of a chance, but I think I try to get all the good stories in the book. Yeah.
Right. Most of your time, I guess, and I guess your best times, and what makes most of the book is in Sweden. And it's funny, when you got traded to that team, you ended up having like 50 points and 34 games. But what really astonished me was the 117 penalty minutes. And I was like, What happened there?
No, you know what happens is when you get like misconducts, they really add up quickly. Because I remember looking
10 minutes?
at that too. Yeah, you'll get like if you get like a couple 10-minute misconducts, they would hand out. I mean, Sweden was like you'd get, and the thing that's like crazy is that it would never affect anything because like you'd get a 10-minute misconduct when the game's over. So like, what difference does that make? But they would always they handed out misconducts for fucking everything. Like,
oh, okay, that's the thing.
Yeah. I don't think I was. I think it looks way worse. There was not like because there's not that much going on.
Fighting all the time. Yeah.
There's no fighting. I don't even think you could like. I think if you fought, you like get suspended for a game or something. I forget. No, nobody was really fighting over there.
Right.
You get they were very much on like safe hits. Like you could get a 10-minute misconduct if you like hit someone the wrong way. There was a period of time when it was like very conscious of like head injuries and you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. I get it. Yeah, they just have a different way of interpreting
different.
Those.
Yeah.
I got to ask about like one of the I wouldn't say main, but one of the characters that really leave an impression is Erica, the love interest, I guess, in the book is this girl you dated and then you ended up being traded as you were just beginning to date. And we kind of get the sense in the book that, well, not that we get the sense, you're kind of heartbroken and we kind of get the sense that you guys could have been more, but then you got traded and then it's like, So my question was, did you, how did you have like regret of like, maybe I could have stayed or maybe this could have been something, or you're like, no, I just had to go and this was what it should have been anyway. Like, how did you like kind of process that whole thing? Cause
I think at the time I think I was probably too young to actually ever be able to, I think it was like most kind of first loves where like they come to an end and it's probably not meant to be.
Yeah.
And whether it was like getting traded or the season finishing, it probably was going to come to an end at some point, which doesn't make it not meaningful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it wasn't, a good experience, but, I mean, there was not, if you're asking, was there like a part of me that was like, should I just quit hockey, not go to the, be traded, stay here and not be able to play? Because that was not going to happen. I was going to go like that team didn't want me back and I wasn't going to stay because of her. Yeah. But it's definitely, it's not an easy position to be in, but hockey is what I wanted,
Did you keep in touch with her?
Well, I was over there, and then for a little bit afterwards, when I came back home. The problem is those two towns were very far away. Like, it's like Sweden's not that big, but it's like very, very
long
north south. Yeah. And this it was a big difference. So it wasn't that easy to, you can't really visit someone.
Do you know what she's become? Like, is she like married and have like 4 kids now?
I don't know. Probably. I haven't kept in touch.
When was the specific like moment where you thought you had the idea for the book? Like, hey, this is a book. Like, did you know before going over like, hey, I'm going to have a journal and write a book, or when did kind of that idea pop up?
No, there was no journal. There was no idea. I was never into writing. It was, I would say, I think the only writing I did was in college, when you are, one thing we would do in school is like write emails to your teammates. You'd have like, if you have a good story, you try to put it in email and see if you can get a reaction. That was about as close to any sort of writing ambition. And then I would say I didn't do any journals, but maybe
you mentioned in the book like writing stuff down, and so
So I think that, and I remember doing that, and that was like, I kind of instilled that idea into the book as I was writing. So yeah, no, you're exactly right. But that was sort of a device I tried to use, in kind of knowing that I wanted to sort of like keep it alive and show like I was thinking about stopping. But the truth is, I don't think I did anything probably until like 6 months after it was all over. And I think writing was like, I don't really know. I don't remember the moment, but I remember like a period where I was like, man, I kind of started gaining steam. I was like, ooh, this is kind of fun to write about. And maybe I could use that story. And then all of a sudden you kind of get like 5 or 6 pages. And I was like, well, I got time on my hands. Why not give it a go? Yeah.
How, like, you had never written, like you mentioned, like, how do you write like a first book? I mean, did you have some guidelines? Did you have like, because you didn't have a publisher by then, you just started on your own.
Yeah, I had a computer.
So you had Microsoft Word and then a lot of will. Yeah. But how do you start writing a book? That's like, if there's like someone listening, it's like, hey, I always thought of writing a book, but I don't know how to start. And like, how did you start with stories? Did you start by having some structure? How did you do the whole thing?
And I think it's funny because like now I'm obsessed with writing and like learning about it. And I've never really taken any classes on it, but I love reading and I now love all these books behind. These are all my only books. It looks like I have a lot of books, but this is the only way that I can position it. These are my only books in my apartment. And a lot of them are about like writers talking about writing. And I'm fascinated by like the process. And some will say like, you have to do this or you have to do this. I think I can't stand that because it's like, whatever works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for anyone else. And whatever doesn't work for me maybe is exactly. But I can say from my experience, it was like, if there was, I didn't have any plot or structure. And I think I remember just writing like stories, like I'm going to write about Belgium, what it was like. So I got off the plane and like this happened, not interesting, but it was just like trying to go back. It's like being able to live that experience again and put myself through writing back into that world because it was awesome. I loved that experience. Yeah. So it was like to relive it. And then the first draft, and then basically I was like, I'm going to try to write a book. And the thing that I think made me realize like, okay, it could be a book is like there are a lot of, not as many hockey books, but there baseball and basketball and football and people. I would talk to people. I started emailing writers and they would respond, be like, I love this book. And do you have any advice or whatever? And really it's just kind of like, you just got to sit down and write it. And so that's what I did. And just sort of like, okay, I'm going to write about Europe. And basically I remember finally after it was like 20 or 30 pages, I was like, I'm going to write about Europe, like the experience in Europe. And that was probably like 100 pages. And then I showed it to someone and it was so fucking bad. Like I still have it because it's just like, I wanted to make sure I remember how bad it was to start. It was awful. It is awful.
Why? Because
it wasn't like real. It was like not authentic. It was very much like what I thought sounded good. And what I realized, like all the stuff that I like, whether it's a sports memoir or really any type of writing, it's like real visceral. Like this is so to the point of how do you write? Like think of, you got to do something that you're motivated by, like to just say like, I'm going to write a book about like this really interesting that it might work. And some people are so good that they can do that. I needed it to be like this hockey was what I loved and it got taken from me and I, didn't make it. So like, it was like very like kind of like it's like an open wound. And so it's trying to figure out like, what was it about the game that I like? So I realized I'm writing stories about being in the locker room. I'm writing stories about, and then I basically got the Europe part down. I was like, well, there's some good stuff in college. Maybe I'll write that stuff. And then I was like, well, shit, if I got all that, I might as well just write the shit that happened before college. And then I kind of was like, well, I guess that's the flow of it. to kind of get the whole experience, because it does sort of lead. And there, if you read it, like, there's nothing that was pretty much kind of how it worked. It was basically like writing the end first. That's not by design. That was just sort of the first stories that were freshest in my mind.
What did you find the hardest about writing a book that you, of course, couldn't know? You hadn't written any book in your life by then. So what was the hardest part of writing a book? You know, that you're like, oh, I didn't know about. I would never have known had I not do it.
I think it's like, I like the process of writing. So it's like tough to do anything where it takes like to get that many words down on a monotonous and grueling. But if you want to write, it's like, it's actually what you enjoy. Like, you kind of go into like a trance. So the process that I didn't know, that I think is the answer, would be getting published. That's a whole nother, that's something that's like, you know, you have a book and you're like, well, I got a book. Like, I'm really good. Look at me. And then trying to figure out how to get is a much more difficult, because no one really cares. Like, a publisher is like, well, who's the market? Who's going to read this? Hockey people, they don't read books. Like, boys, they don't read books. So I'm like, well, that's a good point. You know, like, I didn't read and I liked hockey. So it's a fair point that they had. There's a reason there's not a lot of hockey books, you know,
except Ken Dryden. Who's Ken Dryden? So
well, there you go.
By being Ken Dryden.
Yeah, I mean, he was the one, and that's definitely back here, the game. I mean, that was like, after writing that first draft, awful, and then kind of tweaking it and trying to make it more like authentic and real and sound, and then reading those books, like, he's a unique character. I mean, he's like a very, you know, cerebral guy. So, and a goalie. So there was a lot, though, that I remember thinking, like, this is great, because he's kind of taking you into the NHL world. And so there was a lot I took from that book. I think you could feel that
as I was reading it. I was like, I'm sure that guy has read like the game.
Oh, I've read them all. Yeah.
How did you end up like getting a publisher? Like, how was that chase for a publisher? How did it happen?
It was, so what I ended up realizing is you have to get an agent before you get a publisher. And so the agent represents you call it a manuscript before it's published, and they pitch it to publishers. So getting the agent was step one, and basically got turned down. You know, I'd say, hey, I wrote this book. And they're like, well, have you written anything else? No. What's it about? You know, my hockey experience? No. You know, like, nothing there is like interesting to a publisher. And finally, there was a guy, it went back to what we talked about at the very beginning, like Canadians. And I thought, maybe there's someone in Canada that likes hockey that has done this. So I looked up some of these other hockey books that I had read. And usually there'll be some sort of acknowledgement section, and 2 or 3 of these books had said, you know, thank you to my agent, Arnold Gossowich. So clearly I was like, well, I've seen this guy's name in a couple different hockey books. So he's a Canadian agent that was based in Toronto. And so I wrote him an email and said, I wrote this thing. I know you represent hockey books. And so he finally responded positive. Like, it took me 6 months to find him. But it you know, like, makes sense. You find someone that might be interested in the material.
So he read the thing?
He I think he just read like the prologue. Like, I don't even think he read the whole thing, because I didn't send it. He was like, sure, send me, you know, 5 pages. And he's like, okay, I'm happy. Cause like, for an agent, it doesn't take that much. They just make money if it's sold. So you don't have to, like, for them, as long as they think they can make some money out of it, it's just like their time that they're,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So then he took it on and then found a publisher. It was still not an easy thing for him to find a publisher.
So he did find it one in Canada or in the States or?
No, it was in the States. The funny thing is we go the whole process trying to find someone, and the publisher was a New York based publisher that literally their offices were like 10 blocks from where I lived.
Irony.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. And it's I have I couldn't have any less references. How do you know how much a script should be sold when you've never written? How does that whole business side of the thing work?
Well, now it's constantly changing, but the way typically you have an advance, so a manuscript,
right?
You basically sell it. The agent will sell it to a publisher for an advance, and then you have royalties. So on every hardcover, the publisher gets X percent, and then the writer gets Y percent. So there's kind of the dance between, you get an advance if you have if you're willing to take a lower advance, but you get better royalties on the sale. It just depends. And this was it was not, it's not a huge amount. You read some of these people that get massive advances, and that's not what this was.
Stars.
Yeah.
So hardcovers are worth more than pocketbooks?
The biggest distinction was hardcover versus Kindle. I think.
Right. You mean physical or?
Exactly. Yeah. So the hardcovers cost more to produce.
Right.
Because they physically have to do it, so they sell it for more. I forget kind of what the economics are, but the Kindle is typically a different percentage.
Right. I get it. To this day, how many of them have you sold?
It's sold a lot recently. I think in total somewhere around 10,000 grand total.
Do you think that because there's a movie getting made, it helps?
Yeah, I think that helps. It's also you just don't know when something hits. It's not always. It used to be, there's some things that are poised to have big splash, almost 4 or 5 years. So it's
10,000 is quite impressive, though. Are you proud of that?
For a hockey book? Yeah. I'm just glad I like to. I mean, to me, it was never to be about to me, it was just I liked writing. It was fun to do it, and I didn't want it to be the last thing I did. Right. It wasn't I want to write a book about hockey and that's it. So I think it was, the expectations were really never having a number in mind. It's more just.
I think in Quebec, 3,000 is called a bestseller.
But it's also over what period of time? 10,000. It's been a long time for mine, so I don't know how. Some books sell 10,000 in a day. You know what I mean? There's stuff that so it's all kind of very relative, but it was never something for me. It was let's just get a book published.
Did the publisher did they have you change anything, or do they when they take the script, do they go, all right, you're gonna take that out, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do that? What's their feedback before actually publishing what you've written?
Yeah, they asked me. I can tell you exactly what it was. I had the word in dialogue, the word retard.
Right.
So I had said there was a piece of dialogue where one character calls the other a retard, and they're like, I suggest you take another look at it. I was like, that's fair. You know what? I don't want to. I can see how there's just going to be
offensive,
out of context. Yeah, it's not. There's no reason to have it. I can come up with another word. There's tons of other words that are what I'm actually trying to say. Right. Dipshit or something that's So that was it. That was it. They were like, why don't you take another look at this? It's like, that makes total sense. I'll change that word. And honestly, I don't think I changed, like, there were spelling errors, and there probably still are errors in the book, but there was never, they were pretty hands off. And that's kind of one of the things that I liked about it's not necessarily a good thing, but I like the fact that they didn't make me change a bunch of shit.
But I was wondering, like, would they like have someone go over and go, all right, no, you have to change this, and I think you should have written this that way, and you should structure the story differently, blah, blah, all that stuff, but not happen.
I mean, I'm sure that happens in that definitely happens in other books, and I think the editor I had was pretty hands off. I didn't really ask for that much, and I remember thinking, honestly, once I wrote it and I was happy with it, like, I had done a bunch on my own, like changing and revising. Like I said, that first draft sucked. Then I was like, oh, I'm going to add this. I think this will be good. And then I remember thinking, I was like, this is it. I'm done. I don't really, I'm not interested in any more feedback. And he didn't really give that much. I'm sure if I had asked, like, what do you think? You can always find someone that wants to change it. But
yeah.
That was pretty much it.
I'm happy I get to talk to you, because I was just done reading the book that I really enjoyed, like last week or something. And when I was done reading the book, I felt like I wanted to call you up. I didn't know you back then, a week ago. And I was like, man, I have so many questions, and now it's cool because I get to talk to you now, so I can ask those questions. And that's, I don't know if it's a spoiler alert, like, but if you haven't read the book, you might as well pause it, or you can go to read it, or just not care.
Just listen,
keep going. But the book ends, it's the ending that I want to get to. So literally, like, the last few sentences, your agent calls you, you ask what's going on, and you're packing your stuff, and you just kind of taking a picture of her jersey hanging up before the arena.
It's on the back. You see?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that. Yeah,
the picture.
Yeah, we can see the jersey, tiny in the back, and which is kind of a retirement of your own jersey.
That was it. Yeah, absolutely.
And then he says, "Hey, Sundsvall," which is like a team in Sweden, like higher tier, wants you at their practice tonight, and you say, "I peer to the left, my jersey sways in the Arctic breeze, one step closer," which is a callback because you've mentioned earlier on in the movie how you always trying to get one step closer to the NHL. And before I get to ask all those questions, what was your thinking with this ending? Because a lot of the times the books or whatever, they want to have some closure, like, and then you leave it kind of open at the end. And what was your thought process of, like, deciding to go with that ending? What did you want to say? What was the whole thing behind it? When you decided to finish.
And it's like, you're asking about changing. That was probably the one thing that I, again, not really any input not from the publisher or editor, but that I remember thinking I want to spend a lot of time on trying to figure out what the ending is. So that changed a lot. And I think it was, and this is like any ending, it was, there's going to be what actually happened. There's going to be what you wish happened that maybe you can say, oh, this is what happened. I'll put this in the book. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
And then there's like the truth, which is oftentimes somewhere in between what you wish happened and what actually happened. And I remember thinking that's probably like, what's the actual truth here? Like in this ending of this like hockey, misadventures of a hockey fanatic. And it was, that to me was trying the best way to capture what I felt and what the end of the story is, which is not really having real closure, having some sort of hope live on, but not actually ever, finding out what comes of it. Because, right. I mean, that was it. That was the end. And so I think it was like, it's never just like, you can't really, I can't explain it. I'm just trying to like put into words in the book sort of right. What the truth was for me.
It's so funny because I had such a different interpretation of it.
Oh, really?
Before I get to tell you what.
Well, that's your turn. That's fair enough.
That's the thing with art, right?
Exactly.
Some things out there, and then it's not yours anymore. But was it true that a higher tier team actually called? Or?
Yeah, I mean, what the facts? So what actually happened? There was. It was not while I was retiring it, but there was an opportunity to finish so this is a team that at that point, I don't know where they are now, but it was like a level above where I was playing. So it would have been like a new, a step up, and it was very close. So like we used to go, there'd be guys that would go back and forth. And so it was sort of like, this is the team that provides like the next step closer. I mean, it's still very, very far from the NHL. But
was it Allsvenskan or was it the one underneath? Yeah. So it was Allsvenskan, which is just beneath the SHL, which is the top Swedish league.
Correct. Yeah. And it was basically like you could go practice, finish the season with this team, and I could tell like halfway through the final season I was there, it was like, if I keep doing this, I'm probably not going to stop. And I kind of had to, at some point near the end of the season, I kind of was like, you know what? I think I can move on. Like I started to talk to friends back home and was trying to figure out like what's, like setting up interviews, getting to talk to people. And I remember thinking I'd done this for 3 years after college. I think it's time to, like, if I don't move on now, it's going to get really, really hard to stop.
Right.
And I kind of had come to this decision, like, this is it.
Just felt right.
Yeah. I mean, it was not quite as simple as like, I have the answer, but it was like, there's always going to be some sort of temptation. And then when I ended up going home, so I knew, I was like, all right, this guy, like, do I want to go practice with this team it was basically like, go over to this team in Sundsvall. Once the season's over, you practice with them. They weren't in the playoffs. And then, and I was like, all right, like just practicing with them is not, it's not like I'm going to start the season in August with them. Right. Which if I'm going to do it, let's start a new season with them. And then there were second thoughts over the summer trying to figure out like, maybe I should go back but it was like, it just kind of felt like I was ready to try to do something new. And it was committing to it was in part writing, being like, okay, maybe there's something else that I can do that can fulfill that, need that I have.
That's when you started writing.
Yeah. And I think that helped sort of like get me past the desire to play, because that then faded quickly. Yeah.
Right. We actually stopped in Sundsvall on our way up to meet Marcus Naslund, and on our way back to Stockholm. So we actually stopped twice when we went to Sweden. Because like my take on it, on the ending. Well, first of all, my initial when I wanted to call you up and ask you questions was because all this thing is about this guy, right? Yourself going over and not letting go of hockey, like not being able to let go, or at least to begin with, right? Yeah. And I was like, and I couldn't wait for that moment that we just talked about right now, which is, when do you know that it's time to go, and when do you know why are you so sure about it, and how does this transition go, like in real life, like you mentioned, like how do you stop being like a hockey player and go, all right now I got to get a job and I got to do something else and start over, and how does that go in real life, right? Like, because that transition, it's a hard one.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not simple. It's
exactly
not an easy one. Yeah.
And I think and is that something you wanted to leave out of the book, or you just like,
I thought that was sort of a different story. To me, this was just the hockey, right. the hockey story. And I think that I wanted to, I guess I came to that to that ending because it felt like I knew that there was always going to be a part of me that still loved the game. And so that was sort of what that I was trying to convey. Like there's always a part of my mind, like, what,
it's never going to be over. Yeah.
It's never, but what I think helps what I realized is the way to, that's normal. That's sort of like the human condition, like that's what we're all sort of up against.
Yeah.
It's not hockey for everybody,
Yeah.
But it could be the lost love, or it could be whatever it is, but it's finding the next thing to sort of pursue.
Right.
Which is what I think makes the transition a lot easier. Because if you don't have something new to kind of obsess over, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I went back to the book after like thinking over and like rereading those last sentences. And my second take on it was that once you've like kind of retired and your jersey and kind of see your jersey go away, you've decided by that time I'm done. And that last sentence where it says one step closer, I feel like this time compared to the previous ones, this one is kind of ironic. like as if you're actually one step, like, of course I'm not like, I gotta go home and like this is over.
Yeah. No, so that's probably, and I appreciate, because the cool thing too is one of the cool things about writing to me also, and not my writing, but when I would read the stuff that I really liked, because that's now like when I find like authors that I love, like a lot of the best stuff is very I don't know if it's subconscious or unconscious. It's just these things they don't even understand. Like these writers that I'll read, like they've even said, like, I don't fully know, but it's coming from a spot that maybe someone else can interpret in a different way.
Absolutely.
Which is a cool thing.
Absolutely. That's the best thing about art. And that would lead us to, like, speaking of transition, people would wonder, what do you do now? What's your life now?
Yeah. Not hockey. No.
Well,
no. So I work at I work with, at a digital publication, and, I work on sort of the business end. I'm the COO, so it's the, a lot of the numbers, but the business itself is journalism, media, and writing, and so I spend a lot of time with writers, talking to them, reading stuff. I'm able to write.
So you still write?
Still write, exactly, for sure, and that's I think something that's never going to stop, I hope.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but for a brief period of time, after the first book, you did get some other job that you, I believe, hated.
Yeah.
and then wrote a book about that.
Yeah. So, no, I worked at a bank. I worked at a bank for 2 years, and I wrote about that. That was the
which is book. Pretty much the opposite of working in a bank.
Without question, yeah. It's very, very much so. I think you're spot on.
I think I saw in the internet something about like a viral resignation letter that you might have written. What's the story behind that?
Yeah. So I did, in an attempt to find something new. I mean, like writing is what I love. It was not going to pay the bills. That book was not Odd Man Rush. The royalties have not been that great for me. But
should have taken a better percentage.
The agent, there you go. But
you'll know for the next book.
Exactly. But I ended up at a bank, and it was very much like you said. Not only is it kind of the opposite of writing, because there it's like everything is black and white, and you kind of just go in this like numb sort of like monotony, which to me is when you're writing, it's very much you're in shades of gray and the unknown. And so it was a great experience to write about, but the actual experience itself was really shitty. For me, it was not what I wanted to do, but I didn't find that out until I did it. Like most things, you got to kind of do it. And it was interesting kind of writing from the hockey stuff isn't, that's you're writing about something you loved. This one was coming at it from a different angle. It was more something I loathed. And so it was like, how can you make that still an interesting story? But it was.
What's the name of your book?
It's called Discussion Materials. Discussion Materials: Tales of a Rookie Wall Street Investment Banker.
Same publisher, different publisher?
It's a different publisher, yeah. It was a different publisher. Yeah.
I guess that would bring us to our last question, which is the book, Odd Man Rush, is about, finding what you want to do with your life, and you've tried hockey and then investing. Bill, do you now know what you want to do with your life?
Yeah.
Writing.
Still. Yeah.
Well, that's just great. Would you have you thought about through writing, finding your way back to hockey, or working in trying to find your way back to hockey in some way?
It's funny, and I was just trying to, because when you were asking, I had a thought and then it slipped my mind, but I remembered everything I've done since hockey has actually very much been related to, I owe everything to hockey. The job I have now was, the guy that runs it is Canadian, and I kind of met him not because I played hockey, but because there was that sort of connection. He from Ottawa, and he actually helped with publishing an excerpt of Odd Man Rush,
really,
in a magazine he worked at. So I feel like hockey's always going to be a part of it. I don't know. I'm pretty open. I just know it feels like I'd be open to anything. Hockey's always I realize even if I'm not playing it, it's going to be something I love, and when I want to watch it now and sort of talk about it. I love talking about it. It's fun to talk with you about it. But I think it's just a matter of focusing on what you want to do, pursuing it. And, it's not like it's easy necessarily making it and writing as a profession, but I think you just kind of do it and you see where it leads. But yeah, it'd be cool to always I always find myself that was the difficulty with the bank, is that there weren't people that I could relate to that, I'm not saying everyone had to have played hockey, but no one, I couldn't really find common ground with those people. So
I know it reminds me of my college years before I got to comedy. So I'm I relate to that. Bill, it's been almost 2 hours.
Wow.
Thanks for your time. I hope, I told you 1 hour, but we kind of busted there because it was interesting, but I hope you had a good time.
I had a great time. This was so much fun.
Thanks for coming on. And I hope you I'm sure there's some job for you at MSG on some sort of level. And I hope the next time I get to New York City, which is one of my favorite things to do, we get to go and see and watch a Rangers game.
I hope so too. Absolutely.
Who just drafted Montreal native.
I know. Thank you guys for producing him. We're excited. You
guys won a lottery you were not supposed to win, and that is just fine the way it is, because you're going to get some cup in the next 4 to 5 years with Panarin and all those guys. God damn it. Thanks for coming on, Bill, and stay on for a second so we can finish the recording.
Absolutely.
But thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you so much. It was a lot of fun. And absolutely let me know when you're here, and I'll do the same next time I'm in Montreal.
All right. Thanks. Merci à Bill Keenan d'être passé à Drette sur le tape. Franchement, un sympathique gars. J'espère un jour lui serrer la pince en personne à NYC, The Big Apple, et peut-être voir une game des Rangers. Je vous rappelle que son livre s'intitule Odd Man Rush. Il est disponible un peu partout. Vous pouvez également dès maintenant écouter les prochains épisodes de Drette sur le tape. Ils sont déjà disponibles sur Patreon. Je vous dis à la semaine prochaine. Take it away, Bobby! Now! Yeah, now! Okay, bye!